extraordinaire, the gemologist.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Geomologist Presents. Today, we have kind of a panel. I like to have special guests, and I have two special guests with me today. First, we got Arlen.
Hi, I'm Arlen, and I almost said I'm playing and then stopped myself, but then I talked about it. Yeah, hi, I'm Arlen. I do Live from Pelham's Wasteland. That's the thing to say.
There it is. Yeah. So Live from Pelham's Wasteland is like a book reading thing right now.
Yep.
Pretty cool. Reads a lot of, you don't
Yeah.
read the book in its entirety, but you give excerpts from the book and analysis, correct?
Yeah, I talk about, what I thought about the book and whether or not I liked it and whether or not I think someone else should read it. That's kind of the big thing.
Oh, book review and recommendation. I love it.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Check out Live from Pelham's Wasteland. And next we have BJ.
Yeah, I rarely do I not go first in alphabetical stuff. There has to be someone with an A in their name to,
But the other players are usually A's. Arlen,
you
Amy. Usually I do
know.
it in order of if they're on the screen, but
Unless you go in order of our online presence, then I'm double A, Arcane Alienist.
oh geez.
I'm BJ Boyd. I am the Arcane Alienist, and I'm just here because Carl said, "Hey, we're going to do something." So
We should do something. Well,
yeah,
and I guess this is kind of in a way inspired once again by the incredible dungeon plunger who kills toilet mimics, which one of these days I will have an outhouse mimic.
yeah.
Oh
Where does
no.
he get?
Mm.
How does he get all these awesome interviews? I listened to his interview. Just finished his
No, it's
interview with
amazing. He just asks. I'm sure most people are really willing to interview, and I know I've approached. I've done it in the past. I've done it. I've approached people, and they go, "Oh yeah, we should have an interview," and then I never freaking follow up. So it's my bad. He's just
Uh,
diligent, and it's awesome. I mean, I know I have some interviews at least one interview scheduled um, for North Texas RPG Con, and they're just going to be more bold. I think. Screw it. I should be more bold, right? I mean, we're trying to hit milestones on the YouTube, and I got to do it.
Yeah.
But apparently, also he goes to like the anti-Twitter Blue Sky, and that's where a lot of these people are. So I think that's probably what I might start doing, at least on the Geomologist Presents and talk. There's some really cool people that I played with and met. I mean, among others, someone we'll probably discuss a little later. Zeb Cook. So yeah. Anyway, well, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to unbox in front of you guys because I haven't had one in a while.
unboxed. Better than unboxing, I guess.
Yeah, it's an unboxing. It's a Amazon package. I got this like on a weird Amazon fire sale. So it is I know people hate this, but too bad. It's 11 inches, so that is approximately 29, well, it's 28 and 3/4 centimeters. And the height of this box is 32 inches. No, sorry, a foot and a half, actually. Nope, that's not right either. 1 foot and a half inch. That makes sense? Which equates to about 32 centimeters. And how thick is this thing? It's like Coke can thick. There's a friend of mine back in after college. I had a crazy time after college. I haven't been drinking. No, I did have a couple beers, so apologies. All right, 3.5 inches and about 9 centimeters. That makes sense. I had a
There's
friend, a friend
You're
after
mixing
college.
you're mixing your metrics, Carl.
No, I'm supposed to because I have listeners that use real measurements
Oh, okay.
and
Those are the equivalents. I thought you meant it's that many inches plus that many centimeters. I was
no,
like,
no.
Now,
What I was
now, which
saying,
one is the real measurements? You have to, pick a side right
the
now.
rest of the world uses the real measurements, and us and a few other countries in Africa, probably, I think Liberia maybe, uses like the old English system.
I guess
Is
I'm
that
gonna
correct?
leave.
Huh? Is that right? Why are you gonna leave?
No, it's good.
It's just funny. It's just funny. Did you guys ever see that SNL skit where what's that guy? This guy comes on, he pretends to be George Washington, and
yeah, Nate Bargatze.
mhm. He's like, and we're gonna have a system of measurements where you know a yard is 3 feet, and
Well, it's all the right. It's the weird, like, historical accretion of elements, right? Because like the number of feet in a mile is a Roman legion's worth of steps,
Oh,
basically.
I did not know that. That's cool.
Yeah, yeah, it's the 5,280 is um a Roman cohort was 480 soldiers, but the first cohort was double sized. So
Mm,
essentially 11 times 480
I see.
is how you get to the length of a Roman imperial mile, which turns into a,
English
British
mile,
mile, which
British, yeah,
turns,
British mile.
yeah, an English, I guess an English mile technically, because it's not really the other
Yeah,
British people doing that.
I feel
I
like
did,
back in the 70s there was an attempt to get make everything metric, and science obviously uses like in a publications use metric,
Mhm.
yeah.
right? But generally speaking, but if we switch to like kilometers, then everyone would be driving faster, right? We'd all be driving 100, right, on the highway or more. All right.
I
Okay.
think I liked about that particular SNL skit was when we talk about hot dog, but there's not a dog in the hot dog. Someone says, "Well, what's in the hot dog?" And he said, "No one will want to know what's in the hot dog." And he's like, "But I want to know what. Get out of the boat."
That's a really good sentence. Good. All right. Well, anyway, I had a friend of mine named Coke Can back after college in the crazy days. You can think of what reasons he might be named Coke Can. All right. Anyway, the unboxing, the
There's
family, the family show.
a
Carl,
there's a
what?
YouTube channel that I watch where the way that he measures his reading is linearly with measurement. So his
Oh,
thing is that he's measured the total, essentially linear distance of the spines of all the books on his shelves, and then when he reports on how much he's read for the week or the month or whatever, he says, "Well, this is the, distance that has been cut down from the total amount of distance on the shelf." So I think it'd be hard to do that with RPGs because you use them a little differently, but
right.
you could
Yeah.
do something like, right, you could do that like with Pathfinder Adventure Paths, be like, this is the total distance we've traveled through the adventure path through
Oh,
each
right.
book.
Yeah. Usually it's about halfway in my experience, especially the 6 book ones. Anyway, this is what was in there. It's called The Eternal Night of Lockwood. If you go to any half-price books right now, you probably see a ton of these. And I got it on Amazon, like at the fire sale for like pretty inexpensive. But it is a full adventure for Zweihander, so the previous edition. Right now, the reforged edition is coming, revised, reforged is coming out. But this is looks pretty. It looked pretty interesting. I mean, it's um, it's like I said, an adventure path, and it consists of the like it has a gazetteer, player options, running the adventure, NPCs, and then a whole bunch of different chapters. So it looked pretty cool, yeah. So I decided to pick it up, just maybe either to use it or to crib ideas from it. But it's got a cool map of the area, which is nice. And yeah, we were kind of talking about. Have you ever played Zweihander, BJ?
I have not. I've read through the book,
Oh,
um,
then you revised Reforge or
not the new one, the
the
original one.
the original one?
Yeah,
I mean, it's kind of based off the. It's pretty nice gazetteer. I love gazetteers when they have like they give you the whole map of the town and then they kind of like give you like little insets, which is
yeah.
kind of nice.
I always thought so Zweihander is to Warhammer
Great,
what Pathfinder is to D&D.
yeah, great picture. Typical. Zweihander. You're not a hero. You're a survivor. Look, you got put in the
Yeah.
stocks. Ha 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 ha.
They're like nobody liked, was it third edition
Oh
Warhammer
yeah, it
Fantasy
was.
Roleplay? So
You know,
Zweihander just created a cleaned up version of TUI, which everybody loved. Kind of like the original Pathfinder was nobody liked 4E D&D, so they created a cleaned up version of third edition
what
D&D.
the heck?
Well,
Look at
that's the
like what an Oinadaemon.
Warhammer
What?
Fantasy Third Edition was by Fantasy Flight, and it was one of the first that they did their funky dice systems for,
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
um,
I was
which
impressed
is why
with
people didn't like
This
it.
is a really well.
Fantasy Flight perfected their Genesis role playing system using
Yeah,
other people's IP to
yeah,
do
yeah.
research and get all the bugs worked out of it.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool system actually. Yeah, so
Yeah,
look, this has. I mean, I love a book that has like these things, little ribbons, which
they
is
use their
nice.
Games
Mhm.
Workshop and Lucasfilm IP contracts to perfect their system,
Right.
to play
Yeah. Well,
test it, and it took all the risk.
right. Actually, one of the better Twilight Imperium is actually a pretty cool game too. So whatever, so they kind of have a Genesis system based Twilight Imperium, which I've
Yeah, if you
started,
have
which I
12 hours sitting around for,
no,
you know,
well, I mean, yeah, I mean, well,
is
I hope.
doesn't the board game take like basically a full day to
yeah,
play?
something like that. That's what I've heard. I've never played it, but the world look sounds really cool. And I did kind of buy a couple of the books and stuff, and
Hmm.
I they had a free RPG day thing, and I've tried to build up a game on the Roll20, so maybe that's something down the line.
Mm.
Well, anyway, so this here's the I'll read the BJ's disappeared, but that's okay. He can hear me. 5 days ago, a starless and moonless night fell over the Lockwood Forest and pioneer town of Ertol. The sawmills have gone quiet, and the lumberjacks have begun to revolt. The eternal night has come, and it had all of Urchal is in the grips of panic and fear. But where there's darkness, there's opportunity. As citizens of Urtal, you'll find yourselves drawn into the pitch black web of urban conspiracy and rural horror, spanning the gloom of the six boroughs and into the ancient Lockwood, which I guess is the forest. Will you rise to the occasion as a light in the darkness, or will you succumb to the eternal night? So it's a campaign-length adventure, going from basic to advanced here.
My,
What's
my
it?
hope is with the revised Vihander, they don't remove the irreverent humor. That was a joy. This, if you guys, I don't know, but this is a joy to read, even though it's thick. Just some of the
Mhm.
jokes they have hidden in the text, it's one of my favorite ones. Is that in the chapter on weapons when it gets to the melee weapons, it's got an alphabetized description and pole cleaver, a very long stick with an axe on the end. It's far more intimidating than a pike, but less embarrassing than a mere butcher's cleaver. Soldiers often partake in Gygaxian musings over the vast array of polearms that dominate weapon
Wow.
ranks, in which the pole cleaver is called merely a variety of names.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. They have like a little map here of the Lockwood and the six boroughs, so it's pretty nice. It's a poetic type map. That's pretty cool. So it clocks in at including it has a bunch of handouts, which is nice. Of course, the pages aren't numbered, or at least the appendix, the pages aren't numbered. You're supposed to, I guess it's supposed to go with this Whitehander Fantasy Horror Starter Kit, which I do have too. 367 pages plus a few pages of handouts, so which is nice. So yeah, I mean it's a very simple system. It's percentile dice, roll under. You get criticals on the doubles, a critical success or a critical failure on the doubles. I know that Zweihander had simplified things such that you have like it's easy, it's hard, or it's normal, whatever. So it's -20 +20, and then each advance gives you 10% in your skill. So they kind of streamlined in a way, even the Warhammer Fantasy Second Edition. So which is
Well, and
kind
they
of nice.
got away from in the Warhammer Fantasy Second Edition in particular, part of the thing was that all of the careers just sort of existed by themselves, and you could kind of go from a lot of them to a lot of other things. And so there was this weird way in which, like, if you wanted to, you could just go through kind of a total, like, zipping through all of the different things that you wanted to hit. And in Zweihander, they're like, no, there's novice or whatever they call it. There's the lowest level, and then when you finish that, you move on to the higher level, and when you finish that, you move on to the higher level instead of because the other side of that with 2E Warhammer Fantasy role playing was that there were some things that you basically had to play and play and play and play forever to get through all of the careers that would get you to the big special thing at the end.
Right. You have to go through multiple careers to get to that career, and then you'd have to find or purchase the trapping somehow to qualify for that career. So Warhammer 4th actually did has done that sort of streamline where you can move up. They have definite steps on how you move up in your career,
Yeah,
and you
well,
can move up through.
and they built it so that you don't really have to change careers if you don't want to in
Right.
in
But you
4E,
have that
but
option, which is
yeah,
great.
all the careers basically have kind of room to advance up within the career, or you can switch over to something else if you want to advance there.
Yeah, that's something we should try on the channel, I think, is a Warhammer Fantasy. I've always wanted to do like a Lustria type campaign.
Well, I keep saying we ought to do something with Soulbound with all of the
Yes,
funky, high adventure, high fantasy magic stuff that's in
with the
that. But
Seraphon, right? With
yeah, well,
the
that
lizard
was
folk. Yeah.
yeah, that was my suggestion is to do something with the Seraphon because there's
Because
some
there is like
cool.
a supplement to do that too.
Yeah,
I think that'd
yeah.
be kind of neat. That'd be fun. I think I actually started building up a Roll20 or at least have a banner for it. So that could be something to do as a one shot or whatever. All
Yeah.
right. Well, thank you guys for indulging me with the unboxing. But I know, we did like a podcast a few months ago on things Greek and running a game in ancient Greece. And I think Arlen had uh maybe based on that conversation, I don't know, but he has just read some books that tackled that subject, especially the subject that he thought would be a really cool place or time frame to put a game in.
Well, now you built it all up.
I
I
know.
hope it
So I hope it's
features.
good.
But I did finish just today Mary Renault's Fire from Heaven, which is the first in her trilogy about Alexander the Great. And it was really good. So I can totally recommend anybody who wants to read some well done historical fiction.
Hmm. Okay, so
Um,
it's historical fiction. Okay. Are you
historical
gonna share
fiction.
it on Pelham's Wasteland or
I'm
keep
gonna
it?
wait to finish the whole trilogy probably before
Okay.
I talk about. I'll just talk about it all in one because I like to do that.
Hmm.
Although it's interesting, she makes the point that despite most of the big events that we associate with Alexander historically not having happened by the time the book ends. The book ends basically with him immediately in the aftermath of the assassination of King Philip II of Macedon, his father, and Alexander is ready to take the throne and go do all these things. And that she makes the point that the book, despite not covering almost all of the famous things that we associate with Alexander, except for a couple of famous stories from his childhood, it does cover basically two-thirds of his life
Hmm. This is true.
because he died so young and because he did kind of so much basically in his 20s.
Hmm.
Um, and so there's an interesting point there. Mary Renault also famous for writing a series about Theseus that I haven't read.
Hmm.
I think it's two, and a couple of other. There's a lot of what at the time was really quite groundbreaking of her willingness to put homoeroticism and homosexual themes into print, especially when talking about the Greeks, that for a long time there was a sort of in various kind of thoughts about the classics, there's this sort of struggle of wanting to be honest about what material is in the classics and also a real, deep-seated homophobia, especially in like academia and all these different depictions and all that sort of stuff. And so it was a big deal in like the 50s and 60s when she was like, no, actually, a lot of these characters did not feel about homosexuality the way that we do. And so it makes sense to be upfront about that when talking about these characters.
Hmm.
Anyway, so yeah, that's it. And apparently, this particular one, Fire from Heaven, was a big inspiration for the young Alexander parts of Oliver Stone's Alexander,
Hmm.
which is not a good movie, but is worth watching because it's this kind of fascinating mess. Um, Oliver Stone, right, is like a crazy person, and all of his movies have some of that quality, and some of them it makes the movie incredible. So something like Platoon absolutely rocks, and some of them it makes them kind of a mess, which is how I feel about basically almost everything else that he did, to be honest, even though I like the movies a lot. Um, his version of Alexander is interesting in that there are um, real like some real incredible historical work done. So like a bunch of the actors had to learn how to ride bareback because they didn't have stirrups at the time. And so they basically had to learn how to ride like the ancient Macedonians did for scenes where Alexander and these other cavalrymen are on horseback.
Hmm.
Um, and some of that is really good, but the movie itself is basically a huge mess because it covers just way too much material and has all of these different multiple kind of plot lines going on, and there's all sorts of weird weird things going on that make it not a very good movie in the sense of like sitting down and enjoying yourself and following everything that's going on and being interested in watching more. But some bits of it are really incredible. There's a scene that is an adaptation from, I think it's in Plutarch, but it might be in Arian, a story after Alexander has defeated Darius, the emperor of the Persians, and he has taken over, among other things, the royal harem, basically, all of the wives of Darius. And back then, of course, it was a agreed upon common behavior to much the way that when a new male lion takes over the old pride, they kill off all of the babies from the old male lions to cement their rule, basically. Same thing happens with people. Makes sense. So it's a story about Alexander having essentially won the empire, um, and the mother of the favorite queen of Darius comes in and is essentially begging for the life of all of these members of the royal harem and for their children. Um, and does not recognize which one of these young Macedonian officers is actually Alexander, and prostrates herself before Hephaestion, Alexander's best friend and probably lover. And in the movie, it's really well done as a scene that is um, really fascinating in the kind of implicit violence that's going on, that she's going through basically the worst moment ever in her life, and all of these 20-year-old warriors who have just taken down the most powerful empire in the world are giggling because she's doing it to the wrong person. And
Mm,
it's really fascinating. And unfortunately, a lot of the rest of the movie is not nearly as good as little bits like that. So, you know,
interesting. Well, Oliver Stone did help write Conan the Barbarian too.
he did help write Conan the Barbarian, and he did the Doors movie with
Mm, Val Kilmer.
Val Kilmer. Yeah. Also kind of a mess, but
Yeah.
interesting and worth watching
Well,
for
but it's
sure.
almost like it should be a mess because
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that was like that's what Jim Morrison was like, and so of
yeah,
course it
yeah.
ought to be a
Interesting.
mess.
Cool,
Uh,
cool. So can you
yeah,
give us maybe since you'll probably talk about it more on your podcast when you're done, can you give us sort of either highlights or a non-spoiler, you know, impression? Not summary would give too much away probably for Fires of Heaven, but if you could, let us know other than, oh, you really liked it, but what stood
yeah.
out or out.
It's Alexander's boyhood,
Hmm.
not yet a major hero, not yet. Like I said, it ends before he has invaded Persia and done all of the famous things that we know him for, basically. Already a kind of remarkable figure in Greek history before that for some of his
Hmm.
daring exploits and all these different things. Um, but it's really a sort of fascinating attempt to get at the nature of all of these historical figures, and in particular to try to understand like what would drive a person to be Alexander the Great. And I think works well at that. It's really a really great novel, basically.
Yeah, yeah. So I have another question, BJ, unless you have a question for Arlen about Fires of Heaven. You're muted.
No, go ahead.
So how would it work if you put a role-playing game attached to Fires of Heaven or through Fires of Heaven? Could it work, or
Well,
would it just be too linear? Probably too linear. I don't know. What could you do?
it'd probably be linear. I think there's some elements that could be really good. There's one of the things that happens um eventually in the story is that Alexander has shown himself to be very capable and a, young heroic figure. His father, Philip, is a remarkable leader in his own right, but not as remarkable as
Hmm.
Alexander. And there is a real tension in there of the um, between those two men at this point, basically, of kind of Alexander wanting more and more chances, wanting to be secure in the position of royal heir because it is not. The kingship of Macedon was passed by elective succession, and Philip himself actually became king after his brother died, and his brother's son was underage, and so was not acclaimed as the next king, which is
Hmm.
a
I see. Yeah.
important thing to want to like. If you want to be the next king, it's not enough to just kind of be around and be the eldest son of the king and all that, and probably not even really Philip's eldest son because he had a lot of illegitimate children, um, who all might have some interest in that also. And I think that that sequence of basically the tense space of the young hero and the old king, and the two of them trying to figure out how to um, interact, and neither of them really willing to give much ground, would make a really powerful kind of tense place as part of a setting, right?
Hmm.
Like your adventurers show up and you're mixed into this distinction between kind of two powerful figures, one who has more power right now but is on the decline, and one who has less power but is on the rise, and kind of are asked to make a choice between these two people. And I think that would work really well for a arc of a campaign or something like that.
Yeah, I guess you could do that. I just thought about something. You could do that in sort of a Mallory Arthur tale too, right?
Yeah, yeah, I mean
Arthur on the
that's also
decline. Yeah, I guess that happens.
yeah,
Arthur on the decline, Lancelot on the rise, right?
yep,
And it kind of does lead to a civil war in a way, right? So
yeah, yeah.
interesting. But that doesn't happen in the probably in that book or historically, right? There's no.
No actual definitive civil war. There's some kind of raiding back and forth, and
Hmm.
there's, um, eventually it's the book suggests that Alexander was not aware of the assassination plot against his father,
Mm.
and probably wouldn't have been a fan of it, and that it was largely instigated by a number of other historical characters, Alexander's mother, Olympias, and Demosthenes, the famous Athenian speaker and figure of kind of a complicated political past,
Mm.
and of course the new emperor of Persia, Darius, and a couple of other famous historical figures. And I think that's also kind of the interesting. I mean, nobody knows for certain,
Right.
right? And historians have debated about. I mean, Alexander was definitely the beneficiary of Philip's death and became the king and got to go off on his huge invasion of the East and get to be Alexander the Great, partly because he was right at the age to take over. And so there's a sort of interesting question there. But no, it doesn't turn into real civil war, although you could easily have in a fantasy campaign that could be more like, you know, Mordred's taking over of the army in
Oh,
Arthurian
okay. Yeah.
stories or
Yeah.
something like that.
Right. Cool. All right. Well, BJ has a book that he's excited about.
It's not a new book; it's a series.
Hmm.
I was going to say I've been watching on Amazon the new series Murderbot, which is based off the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. It's a really good sci-fi series. It's I don't know if I mean the book series is full of humor. I don't know if it's intended as a humor series. It's just the main character point of view character is just really sarcastic and funny.
Hmm.
Um, the series itself is kind of presented as sort of an action comedy, but for anybody who's not familiar, this Murderbot is it's set in the future in a kind of a it's almost got a cyberpunk ethic where there's this corporate controlled space and then there's non-corporate controlled space, and you get a lot of the sort of corporations kind of quest for profit rules everything. But whenever you rent equipment from one of these or buy something, they provide you with a security unit, which is an android. It has some organic parts, but it's mostly mechanical. It's artificial intelligence. Uh, ostensibly to protect you and their property, but then they also use it, for corporate espionage to spy
Mm,
on people. But the whole premise is the main character is one of these security units that their memories get wiped at the end of every mission, and it figured out how to stop its memory from getting wiped. So it's
yeah,
developed a
I remember
sentience,
that.
its own personality, and its
Mhm.
own and what since it rarely has to do anything on most missions, it's developed this habit of it just sits in the corner and downloads soap operas from the net and watches soap operas.
That's
And it
funny.
gets really irritated when a human has to interrupt its, time with its soap operas to actually have to work.
Mm,
So the overall series is about it sarcastically names itself Murderbot. Um, but the whole series is about arc is it becoming more and more trying to understand humans and understanding its point, what it means to be free and autonomous. Um, but the right now they're just the first season of the series is based on the first book where they introduce Murderbot and the humans that it befriends, and it's pretty funny. Alexander Skarsgård plays the Murderbot, and most of the cast are probably people. They're people I've only seen as David Dest. I never can pronounce his name. Destamala Chain. Dest. He was the Spot in Suicide Squad, the second Suicide Squad movie. You recognize his face. He's been in a lot of stuff.
cool.
He's the only other actor in there I really recognize, except they have cameos by more famous actors as Murderbot is in his head watching soap operas.
Oh, cool.
So they've had Clark Gregg that plays Coulson in Marvel. They've had John Cho, um, and I think that's kind of funny. The cameos for the soap opera stars and these little images in his head are actually more more recognizable than the most of the actors, except for those two. But anyway, it's pretty funny and it's really good. Been really good so far. So
That's
I
cool.
highly recommend it.
Oh, neat.
Good sci-fi. Interestingly, is how it actually got recommended to me because of what I do for a living apparently the series is very popular with people who are on the autism spectrum
Huh.
because they very much relate to this
To the
sentient, intelligent thing who doesn't really is not comfortable relating to other people, doesn't like to make eye contact, doesn't like to make, pleasant conversation. It's just very, what's the point of this? If there's no point of this, I would like to go back to my thing that I enjoy doing.
right. That's
So
cool. That's interesting.
Speaking of autism, have you guys seen the rehearsal season 2 yet? No?
no.
Okay. All right. So Nathan Fielder is a comedian. The rehearsal season 1, so the concept of the rehearsal is that he spends an immense amount of HBO's money to allow regular people to practice out something that they are concerned about and therefore will have a chance to kind of role play through it and rehearse it before the big thing.
Hmm.
The first season was built largely around a story about a woman who wanted to figure out what it would be like to be a parent, and so it's her with a whole bunch of children actors that's her son at various ages, and he is involved in it. It's all very crazy. The second season is about airline safety and pilots going through kind of weird things, and especially the idea that there's the most common preventable cause of airplane crashes has to do with miscommunication in a
Mm,
cockpit between a pilot and a co-pilot, or between a pilot and the rest of their flight crew or whatever else. But there's also a lot of other stuff, and in particular in season 2, there is a interesting discussion about he talks about how season 1 became really popular, in particular among people who are um, interested in kind of issues surrounding autism as being like a real kind of unintentionally a wonderful demonstration of what it is like to be on the spectrum in a world that is not built for people that are on
mm.
the spectrum, and kind of like trying to think through situations analytically instead of just kind of intuitively, and all of this kind of interesting stuff. And there's a really great sequence where he ends up he's built this whole he's had built a replica of one of the terminals in the Houston airport for several of these rehearsal things that he does. And he's talking with this woman who does like autism support specialty stuff and ends up bringing in a whole bunch of children on the autism spectrum to rehearse through what it's like to go through like airport security and be in the airport and all that sort of stuff. And it's really sweet in the middle
Hmm.
of this insane TV show that's all about him making people do just this unbelievable rehearsal stuff. Anyway, that's what made me think of it because I watched it's only like 6 episodes
Hmm.
on HBO
Okay,
Max and
have to check it out.
I'll
rehearsal
have to check it
rehearsal
out
is
too. Yeah.
really good.
Yeah, I have to check it out. Well, cool. Well, I don't know. Maybe you guys can help
Using
me.
reality television for good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. That's good. Oh, I never got to make my point about Jason Weeb inspired thing because BJ's like, he gets all the good people. Anyway, so Jason had said, sometimes you don't have the best game. Sometimes I don't know, cannot remember the exact quote, but he said in Jason Weeb said this, like sometimes you're not going to play the best game, but sometimes you just got to play. And I think today our game, a couple games got sort of canceled. Just people have got a lot of stuff going on. It's a tough week, I know for BJ and I are, I'm sure Arlen's very busy too, but BJ and I are heading up to North Texas or down for BJ because South is down and north up for me because I'm going north. So yeah, so we gotta catch up on work stuff and get things ready. But I wanted to get together. So sometimes you just gotta be. Doesn't have to be the
Yep.
best game. Sometimes you gotta be. But so I was gonna ask you guys. I'm very excited. I have had a lot of trouble reading through a book lately. I have like a lot of books, and I just stop at some point and pick up the next book. But Arlen and Jason, they kind of said, we're gonna we're gonna do Sundiver. So I was like, oh man, I'll get Sundiver and try. I didn't get to finish it by the time they did their podcast, but I think their podcast, because they really didn't give a whole spoiler, they kind of gave like some highlights and a summary, kind of what Arlen kind of did with in a way with here with Fires of Heaven, and and I read it and I finished it, which is great, and I really enjoyed it. I know you guys are kind of negative about it, not really negative, but I don't know. I don't know how exactly you were. You have to go back and listen to that, Arlen. You don't have to rehash it, but
Book is
you,
not very good.
I liked it though. I liked the book. Maybe I liked the book. There, I mean, it definitely
Okay,
starts
I'll,
out.
I'll listen to it on the drive down to Dallas and
Yeah,
we'll talk.
yeah. I think it was slow. It was really slow to begin with. Like, oh, I'm never going to finish this book. Who cares about this kind of stuff? But then when the action started happening, I think it just went the pace clipped up, and maybe because they're more focused, maybe all the initial stuff just kind of convoluted things, right? I think David Brin was trying to, like exactly what Jason and Arlen said, trying to build his world and throw in way too many elements, and it could have benefited from either another book or like something that Alistair Reynolds did in his sort of Revelation space. He has a collection of short stories that really kind of help bring the Revelation space to life. And I'm gonna pick Arlen, before Jason gets you. We got to do some Revelation space
Mm.
books. I don't know if you read those at
I
all.
haven't read any of them, but
Oh
I
man, we
have.
can, we can even do like
Yeah.
Chasm. We can even do like Chasm City because it's kind of like it's almost like a isolated, right? It's an isolated kind of tale. So, but yeah, there's some good stuff. Check it out, Alistair Reynolds, a Revelation
Yeah,
Space
that's what I
series.
was.
We can even do the short story collection because I haven't read that, but I would love rereading those. Because I think I read them out of order the first time I did it. So it's kind of cool. Anyway, so I have a couple books that maybe since I'm excited about having read a freaking book finally. Um, uh, any recommendations for one of these two? The Doomsday Book by Connie Willis or the classic Robert Heinlein, The Cat That Walks Through Walls? Who walks through walls? I guess the cat is a who, not a that. Interesting. I don't know. I could read the back if you've never read these. The Cat Who Walks Through Walls, he creates the most compelling character ever. Dr. Richard Ames, ex-military man, sometime writer, an unfortunate victim of mistaken identity. When a stranger attempting to deliver a cryptic message is shot in the head at his dinner table, aims to throw him headfirst into danger, intrigue, and other dimensions where Lazarus Long still lives, where Jubal Hershaw lives surrounded by beautiful women, and where a daring plot to rescue the sentient computer called Mike can change the direction of all human history. Sounds kind of Hitchhiker's Guidey, actually. No, but a thinking man's Hitchhiker's Guide. Apparently, that's one of the critics said. So yeah, that's a cat who walks through walls. I thought I had a Lazarus Long book here somewhere. Oh, maybe the moon is a harsh mistress. I have that somewhere too. Um, or is that something different? And then the other book, the Doomsday book, for Kivrin, preparing for on-site study of one of the deadliest eras of human history, was as simple as receiving inoculations against a disease of the 14th century and inventing an alibi for women traveling alone. For her instructors in the 21st century, it meant painstaking calculations and careful monitoring of the rendezvous location where Kivrin would be retrieved. But a crisis strangely linking the past and future strands Kivrin in a bygone age as her fellows try to desperately to rescue her. In a time of superstition and fear, Kivrin, barely made herself, finds she has become an unlikely angel of hope during one of history's darkest hours. I don't know. What do you recommend?
The first one.
Heinlein? Okay. I will try Heinlein. I mean, at the same time, I'm going to be reading Startide Rising, but because
Mm.
because if you didn't like Sundiver, but you really like Startide Rising, then I think I will really like Startide Rising. I think.
Hopefully, it's. I mean, a lot of what I liked about it is that it is very different than Sundiver. Although I think a lot from the sound of it, I think a lot of the things that you liked about Sundiver are still there. That it really there's the the plot is a lot tighter, especially kind of all the way through instead
Oh,
of
good.
just in the kind of last third or so.
Hmm.
Um, but there's also a lot of like the world building is there, but it's a lot better done. Like it's a lot more like what the characters think about this stuff in the world rather than just kind of all these ideas thrown
Like
out without.
info dump. Yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, I thought it was a lot
That's
better.
cool. That's cool. Yeah, and really, of course, it all relates to gaming because would love to run a game in that verse in the Uplift War verse.
Hmm.
And there's a GURP supplement for it, third edition GURP supplement, which I've tracked down PDF wise. Um, but um, but I'd love to get a physical copy at some
That's what
point.
I'll say. The meanest thing about David Brin's book is I think it makes perfect sense that GURPS is the game that people want to play this world with.
Oh, really?
No,
Not,
I think it's the weird thing of there are bits and pieces of it that I think are really good.
yeah.
But I also think there's a lot of it that is like, yeah, this is what sci-fi was like back when they were like, well, we need to put the science in science fiction because we haven't had it for a long time. And then they were like, well, and what else do we put in? And then Sundiver's a great example of like, well, like what the other stuff doesn't really matter, right? Like, you know.
Yeah. Why do you have, I don't know. There are definitely some like weird, like, man, this is 82, right?
1980.
Uh
The
yeah.
Sundiver is 80.
80 for Sundiver, I think 82
Yeah,
or so for
80. So,
Startide.
right. So there's a lot of things I guess they couldn't conceive, when they were writing back then, late 70s, early 80s, right?
Yeah, and one of them
Even like
is,
cell phones,
I
right?
mean, they
Which
couldn't
seems so
conceive
obvious to
cell
us.
phones, but there's also stuff
Didn't you
like
watch
Gene
freaking,
Roddenberry could conceive of it
didn't
in
you, I know,
1968.
didn't you freaking watch Star Trek? Anyway, yeah, but
but there's also stuff like he apparently
car,
can't if you're on Earth, apparently the way you get around is still you get in a personal car and drive
right?
on a highway
Yeah, I don't,
in like the 23rd century. And it's like, come on, man, you can do more interesting than that at
right,
least.
right. Yeah, some things like that are kind of, strange.
That's more J.J. Abrams Star Trek.
Yeah, 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 maybe,
Yeah,
maybe.
yeah,
Oh no, don't give J.J. Abrams, because I know he listens to this podcast. But I mean, don't give
yeah.
J.J. Abrams any ideas for a movie, The Uplift War by
Oh
J.J.
God,
Abrams. Plenty of lens flare.
edit
All
that
right,
out. Yeah.
with lens flare. All right,
One more book. This is not a new book, but it was one I recently read. This is Gentlemen of the Road
Michael
by
Shop.
Michael Chabon.
Okay,
He's probably best known for Wonder Boys. He's not really known for, but this is not really fantasy. It's more like historical fiction, but it's written in the style of Michael Moorcock and Robert Howard.
Mm, okay.
And it's about these two kind of sellswords that get swept up into an adventure that they don't when they don't into. But it's really well written. It's really enjoyable. Um, but this book I got actually has illustrations in some of the chapters by Gary Gianni, who was the illustrator that did the Prince Valiant comic strip.
Oh, wow.
Really high quality, pictures from scenes from the story. Um,
That's
but
cool.
I would highly recommend this one.
Okay. Nice. Oh, so I in my last podcast I talked about what games I was gonna run, and maybe are you gonna do that for Alien Arcanist or Arcane Alienist?
I'm on.
If not,
I'm kind of on a hiatus. I'm trying to find time to get back and record something, but I haven't. I
an
don't know.
incredible solo play lately, the Morkborg and then the Black Sword hack, right, that you just did.
Yeah, I'm wanting
That's
to do
really
a
neat.
part two of the Black Sword hack. It's what
That's
I'm
really neat.
trying to find time to sit down and do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, when you have a teenager, this time of year no time is your own. There's endless end of the school year activities and
Hmm.
banquets for all the activities and graduation. And he's not graduating. We had to play in the band at graduation, and
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no worries. But so maybe then you could tell us what you're going to be running at North Texas. And maybe if you
I'm
want to highlight some things you might be in, I
I'm going to run. The only thing I'm going to plan to run is Morkborg, and I'm going to run Rock Black Sludge, which is the introductory adventure that comes in the book.
okay,
Ran it a couple of times for different groups
cool.
um, here at home and uh, online. So it's one I know well enough to go in, and it lends itself pretty well to the 3 to 4 hour time block at a con. People can get through it,
Neat.
um, and it's got some. Of course, Morkborg. It's not safe for work. It's full of dark humor, but
Mm.
one of the players I ran Mortborg for where we started. I was trying to explain how to kind of lean into the thing, and it's like, oh, so we're supposed to be kind of like the characters from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. I was like, exactly. You're basically sociopaths, but for some reason you still cooperate long enough to
To get things done. Yeah.
to get through an adventure.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think you're playing with someone relatively famous.
I managed to get
I mean,
into.
not aside from myself, of course, but
Yeah, of course. I managed to get into a Swords and Wizardry game ran by Matt Finch himself. So
awesome.
I've
That's
loaded
great.
up my every Sword and Wizardry book that I own to get an
That's
autograph.
cool. That's cool. Yeah, I mean, North Texas is really cool. I played in games run by David Zeb Cook, who we will mention shortly, and Jeff Talanian as well. So and others. So Edwin Naj, who else? Dude also is with the Necromancer, I believe. So or Frog God. Sorry, yeah, that's different, right? Didn't Bill Webb say Necromancer is the rules, Frog God is the world, right? I think,
One or the other.
yeah,
I think you
something like
said
that.
they're going to do that
Again,
movie.
on Jason Weeb's interview with him. So that's cool. All right, well, that's great. I don't know if I mentioned this to you, but I've been able to work on the outlines for my adventures. So the Operation Jersey Devil's done. So I don't know how far we'll get through it, BJ, when we do it. Um, but uh, I'm wondering, like, in my conception already, I don't know. I haven't read through the Dark Tower, um, but I know there's a period of time where there's the uh, Gilead still exists, and that's when I was setting the Song of Roland,
Yeah.
the last 13 gunslingers type of thing.
I think the definitive source for that, and you could do real quick, is that movie they made a couple of years ago with Matthew McConaughey and Idris Elba.
You're being sarcastic, I'm
I
sure.
am. I'm always being sarcastic.
But I wonder how dark. I feel like it's going to be like dark. Like I don't know. I have like ideas for it, but it might be
Yeah.
kind of dark. But that's okay. So I don't know. I was going to use the interesting thing. There's no right in Pendragon. Um there's no like mental stat, correct?
No mental stats really at all, unless you think that being appealing is a mental stat, which probably has something to do with it, but
But I mean,
it's not a,
you're pretty, so you can shoot a gun better. Clearly
well, it's,
agility, But the other thing, here's how I was gonna have the gun damage at least work, right? Gun skill, whatever, that's easily translatable. It's a
yeah, just a
D20
skill.
BRP system, right? So, and no lances, but we'll have guns instead. Maybe someone will be dumb enough to have a bola as their spear. But anyway, so guns, I was going to do agility and then their highest passion, which will probably be 15 or 16. I think that would kind of work, right? And then
Hmm.
I was going to have all the guns have something special, kind of like they're all heirlooms, right? In the fiction, I think they're all heirlooms, so they'll have something akin to that table, that gives them a bonus on something, something. And I'll probably
Hmm.
name all the guns as well. So I think it should be pretty fun. I was probably going to give everyone. I think with the Song of Roland, I probably don't have to give everyone a secret because their gun is really their secret. It's their heirloom and what they hold dear. But like in probably in Mountain of the Gods and Shadow of the Wizard, I was probably going to give all the characters like a secret or almost like a reveal that they could do, like to help the players or not in the first, like something that I think works well with Dragonbane and I guess BRP games in general, is that I've seen is that you could have like a reveal or a secret that you give in each of the acts, and you can break it up into two acts. So I might do that for Mountain of the Gods and Shadow of the Wizard. But secrets tend to work really well, I think. Um, like I know I've had fun with them in Alien RPG. I don't know if you guys have played Alien RPG. No.
I haven't
No.
played it.
Oh my
I haven't
God.
played the Alien
Oh geez.
RPG
You
at all
guys.
yet, no.
Well,
And there's the new
another game in
one.
the queue.
Yeah.
Damn it. So how many games have we thrown in the queue? Soulbound, Alien, Warhammer Fantasy, or Zweihander. Haha. I guess there are quite a few of them. Well, I think I'm gonna stop here. We have another segment where Arlen, BJ, and I created a AD&D 2E character for BJ, and we just decided, or I decided, to just divide it up. So today I will stop. Thank you so much for listening. This has been The Geomologist Presents. Shoot us a line, geomologist@gmail.com. Drop me a DM on the Discords. You can find me on various ones, the Audio Dungeon Discord, our own Geomologist Lab, etc. And, right, the cover clip art is done by my wife Amy, and TJ does the intro and outro music. So until next time, good night and good rolling.